Welcome everybody, you're watching Mr. Fugu Data Science, and today we're doing part 3 of our online sales data project using RStudio. We will do a few examples with ggplot2. The code will be linked in the description below. The purpose and outcome today will be first, evaluating each invoice, putting together all of the items that were sold in that invoice, and getting a grand total for that invoice. Then we will plot the sales data based on dollar amount ranges, but it's not actually a dollar, it should be a British pound. We will investigate sales by each country and plot those as well. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell, and throw a like if you like this video. If you don't like this video, throw a comment and tell me why. We will use knitr, ggplot2, and tidyverse. All of this right here I will skip because it was basically giving me the ability to put this project together. Each project will just be a snippet of what we do per each video. The grand total and larger picture will be put together in the end with a long project in my GitHub. Okay? So, what I was interested in is understanding that while some orders may only have one item, but it may have a quantity of various amounts greater than one, do I have orders that are many items, and it turns out that 95% of the orders have more than one item with varying quantities for each item that was sold in that order. Okay? And this is important because it allowed me to dictate how I evaluate these data. Since it appears that many of these orders, almost all of the orders, have multiple items that were purchased with multiple quantities per item, we needed to investigate each invoice. So I found that this particular invoice had this many items. So basically what I did is I took each invoice and each total, which were rows. So I'll show you what this looks like basically, so you can get an idea of what's going on. So, from these data that we took last time, we were looking at where I added this column that said matches, and what I was looking for is excluding last time any match that was true where I had a duplicate row where there was a cancellation and the original order, and I got rid of all of those because it would mess up my analysis later. And so what I'm left with are all the rows of data where we have some particular invoice and a stock code, and then the price it cost for that item and quantity that you purchased. Now you may have multiple rows reflecting different items that were sold. I just neglected the stock codes here because we don't need those, because I'm pulling the invoice and I'm pulling the count, the dollar amount count by each row. That's why this is fine. So then I find that this particular invoice had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items with whatever quantities, and this was the dollar amount that was given. And then you got to sum that up per invoice, is what the gist of this is, okay? Now, what I wanted to do from there was say, let's form a data frame with these invoices, and let's figure out if we could start putting something together to evaluate this, okay? And what do I mean by that? I wanted to get a grand total for each one of these invoices relative to this particular customer, okay? So what I did was I said, let's create a table where I'm taking MB, just some generic name I created above, where I took the invoice numbers and the totals. okay? And then I said, let's use the lapply function, and let's create a sum based on these invoices. Then let's take our customer ID and our invoice, and let's create a subset of our data. Okay? From there, we're going to do a merge. So what's really going on here? I say, I got my order total. I got my order total, and it looks like this, just the invoice and total. And then I have the subset, which is the customer ID and the invoice. And basically, I'm going to do a merge and base everything off of the invoice since they have those in common. And then we're going to keep all of the rows, okay? Then I get rid of all of the duplicates, okay? So that's what I'm showing here. Because when you're doing that merge, you have to be careful for having duplicate values. Now, I look at the sales data and I say, let's take this sales data and base it off of ranges of dollar amounts. Really, this is British pounds, okay? So I'm saying anything less from basically less than $50, 50 to 100, and etc. And what I do is I say end row, and I take that invoice total, and I'm looking for a strictly less than $50, and then I'm dividing that by the total, which is the number of rows for the invoice. And do that for all of these particular ranges. And what it gives me in the end is this. And this is what I can use for my plotting, where I have a quantity and I have my proportion. So for anything that was sold that was less than 50 British pounds for that order, you had basically less than 1% of the total orders that would have this. Whereas you had 45% of all orders were between 200 and 500 British pounds. Okay? Fine. From there, we take our country totals, which I'm creating here, and I want to find sales by each country. So I'm taking the country column and the total column from the rest of data new data frame from above, and I'm creating a table, and I'll show you what that looks like real quick. Okay, so that's what this looks like here. So it's taking each country by the total for each one of those, each one of the sales. Okay, and then from there we have to sum everything by country. Okay, and that's what you're getting printed out here. It's just ahead of that. And so now you have each country by the number of sales that were done for the particular year that this data set was created. From there, we want to get the proportion of data that was sold. So I say, okay, let's sum the column of all of the sales for this particular website. So this particular column, sum all of the, sum everything. And then we want to round to 2 digits because you're only going to have, a 100th of a cent instead of 1,000th of a cent, okay? Create a new data frame where we're taking our country. We're going to take 3 digits for our proportion here. And we're taking our country sales total divided by the this here. I'll show you what it is. Here, that's our total sales for everything. So now you have a proportion for each one of those, and that's what's printed out here. So the proportion of sales for this website in that particular year, it shows that the United Kingdom had 81.5% of total sales for this website, which makes me think this was a website based in the UK, and therefore I'm thinking that the price for items was in British pounds. Now, from there, I want to say let's take everything that's greater than 1%, because this is a proportion, so 0.01. So anything greater than 1%. But why? Because we're going to do a pie chart and it needs everything to be at least positive, and anything that's less than 1 is not going to show up in our graph. So I call it this generic variable name, which isn't very helpful. And then I say, well, what do I do with anything that's less than 1%? Well, I take all of those countries and I sum them together and I create a new row called others. Okay? So I say, let's take everything that's less than 1%, let's sum it together by the proportion. Let's call it, okay, I called it all others. And then let's row bind it. So we create a new row here. Okay? So that's what's going on. And I only took these values because anything less than this here was less than 1% and came into this sum. Then we need to call ggplot2, which I called above, but I was just letting you see here so you know what's going on. And you need to call this plotting, where we're taking our okay. So I say let's call order ranges. But where's order ranges? Hold on here. Okay. So where's my order ranges? Okay, there. So I'm taking order ranges where I'm taking the quantity and the proportions from above here. And then what I'm doing is, what I'm doing then is using the aesthetic where I'm taking my Y as my proportions. I'm filling everything based on the quantity. And then I'm using here a geom bar which says stat equals identity. And then I decided here to color the outside of my circle and all of the wedges black. You could just get rid of this if you don't want that, and a width of 1. I didn't really see much of notice a difference when I started playing around with this. Then we say, okay, let's call pi. Let's use polar coordinates. Use our y. We will start with 0, which would be referenced here as 0. And then you were saying you're taking your geometry text, and we're going to take our proportions, multiply that by 100 to create a percent, and then here is creating our actual percent symbol. And then this is doing a vertical adjustment where you're basically moving left or right for these values. Each one of these values here, these percents, will start moving based on how you start manipulating this to help kind of fine-tune, but it's not perfect. Now you don't need to use these hex symbols for your color coding. I just chose to make these up. And from there, my labels here, I'm not having an X or Y label or anything noted by fill. And here's my plot name. Okay. We will then use just a classic theme, and then we're taking our axis lines and just making those blank. Same with the text. My legend, I increased the size here because it was quite small. So I increased that. Then I also changed the color here so we have black for the plot title. Okay, and I increased the size here. When you start messing with this, it'll get too big and it'll overrun on the page. Okay. Then, if you notice, it appears that 45% of our data is at least 2 to 500 British pounds per order. Okay, so that's interesting to note. This right here is an interesting reflection from a data set on Kaggle here. Let me explain why. If you notice this, the percentages are different. And there's only one idea that I could think of off the top of my head. Okay? And that would be the fact that the person who wrote that file, I do not think that I think they got rid of the canceled orders, but I don't think they got rid of the original order that was before the cancellation. Even though that may account for only 3,300 orders, I think that may be adjusting for these percentages. I don't know how much that would affect it. I haven't checked that out yet. But that's what I think is my discrepancy between that. From there, we're doing the same kind of plotting, but instead we're using the proportion name and whatever I call the data frame above, and everything else is the same except for this as well, this proportion. Then if we notice here, like I showed above, the United Kingdom occupies 82% of total sales for these data. I would like to say thank you for watching. Please subscribe and turn on that notification bell, and like this video if you thought it was useful. If not, throw a comment and tell me why you didn't like it, so it give me some constructive criticism and help me improve my channel. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.